Hey there, Pastor Mark here. It's our prayer that this message would encourage and equip you in your relationship with Jesus. We're able to provide this content due to the joyful generosity of our financial partners. And if you'd be willing to join that tribe and help get some sermons like this around the world, you can donate at harvestbaptist.info/give. God bless. My family, we love to play board games, card games, those sorts of things. And we have seasons where we will play a game. We do almost never have let's go up to the closet and pick a game, and then the next day, pick a different game. Our kids get fixated on one particular game, and we play it, and then 3 months later, we'll pick a different game. And sometimes they circle back around, and we'll become back in season. So I guess fall season is pumpkin spice and Skull King for our family. We have this game, it's a card game, and this is in the Grandpa Beck games. He has several different card games. Shout out to Grandpa Beck, whoever he is. Not a sponsor of today, but he makes some good games. And Skull King is one that we're playing. Literally this morning, our kids got up and they know you have to brush your teeth and you have to comb your hair and go through the morning things. And they were trying to do it as quickly as possible because I heard Deacon say, if we go fast, we can go play Skull King. He wants to play all the time. And Skull King is based off of different suits of cards trumping other suits. If you've ever played a game like Rook or something like that, then you would understand it. But it has 4 different suits of cards. There's purple, and there's black, and there's green, and then there's yellow. And they're 1 to 14. And you play these cards, and 1's worth 1, and 10's worth 10, and you try to beat other people. And if you're are you going to tell us how the whole game works? No, I'm not. But there's these moments in the game where someone plays a yellow 1 and then someone else plays, say, a purple 1, and you're well, which one wins? Because they're both 1s. And it's, which suit, the yellow or the purple, which one trumps the other? And in this game, whatever suit is played first, whatever suit leads, that's the trump suit. Unless you play a black. Black always trumps all the other colors whenever it's played. So it has this kind of hierarchy of which suit trumps which. I say all this because it has a bearing on 2 John. We looked last week at the importance of both truth and love and how those are designed to be in concert with each other and tremendous dance partners. But there are moments in all of our lives where it seems as though truth and love are juxtaposed to each other, where it seems as though there's this conflict between truth and love, and they're pulling my heart and my mind in different directions, and which one do I choose? There are these moments, I think, just in a friendship where your friend is making choices that are devastating and disastrous to their life, and you have to choose, do I choose love and not hurt their feelings and try to have the waters be calm? Or do I choose truth and speak into what they're doing, and faithful are the wounds of a friend? And there's this moment where I have to risk the relationship, truth, or I have to risk them continuing in this sin without me confronting them, love. Which one do I choose? This happens inside of churches where someone is living in kind of open, blatant, flagrant sin, where it's, do we want them to feel judged? No. Do we want to accept them? Yes. But do we want the name of Christ and the name even of the church to be tarnished if they're unwilling to stop the adultery or whatever it is that they're living in? And there's this tension that happens inside of our hearts. This happens, of course, perhaps in your family. At Thanksgiving, your nephew says something that's just entirely off the reservation biblically, and you're am I going to risk saying something and there'd be a commotion at Thanksgiving, and mom worked so hard on this food and she's going to be mad if there's all this drama? At the same time, I want to speak up because they just said all roads lead up the same mountain to God, and it doesn't matter which religion you are. That doesn't sit well with me, and you have this tension inside, right? One of the most common questions I get as a pastor, probably every 2 or 3 months, is, hey, pastor, I have a coworker or a good friend or a family member, my niece, whoever, who has invited me to their wedding, but this is a same-sex wedding. And this I don't want to offend them and say no because I love them, and this could cause a lot of waves in the family. This is a very tender situation. At the same time, there's a sexual ethic in the Bible that I adhere to, and I don't want to seem as though I'm celebrating something God wouldn't celebrate. What do I do? Right? You got this truth and love tension in your heart pulling at you, or your coworker tells you, well, if you loved them, then you would accept them, you would gladly endorse whatever their lifestyle is, or use whatever pronouns they want you to use, and you don't want to offend them, and you don't want to judge them, you don't want to seem harsh or unloving. At the same time, you don't want to co-sign on something that's not true, and this happens over and over and over again. I could give you 10 other ways where truth and love at times seem to be pulling at each other. And the question is, when those moments happen, which one trumps which? Does love trump truth? Does truth trump love? Which one is the trump suit? And John actually gives us a very specific, concrete example in this text to help us understand this conversation and to get our bearings on what do we do if we have to, push come to shove, choose between truth and love. Let's look at John chapter 1. There's only one chapter, so that's real easy. Verse number 7. Many deceivers are entered into the world. They confess not that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. That's strong language. Look to yourselves that we lose not those things which we have wrought or worked for, but that we receive a full reward. Whosoever transgresses and abides not in the doctrine of Christ has not God. He that abideth in the doctrine of Christ, he has both Father and Son. If there come any unto you and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. For he that biddeth him Godspeed is partaker of his evil deeds. Let's start with what John is describing here, just with the word deceivers. Verse 7, he mentions the word deceiver twice, that there are deceivers that are come. These deceivers, he says, do not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh. What he's talking about is the incarnation, Christmas, Emmanuel, God with us. And this is not something that is a heresy that's all that popular nowadays, but in the first century, there were several different heretical teachings that centered on the idea that Jesus was a ghost or an apparition or some sort of figure, but was not physically in the flesh. The reason that this was here was due to dualism and what is now known as Docetism, which is the basic idea that things that are tangible and material, fleshly, those things are bad, but things that are spiritual or a spirit, those things are basically good. And God, as a spirit good, would not take on flesh because flesh is bad, was the basic logic. Therefore, Jesus did not actually come in the flesh. And as you can imagine, this has a really wily domino effect on Jesus dying bodily in our place for sins, Jesus raising bodily from the dead, and him being the first fruits because we too will raise bodily from the dead. And this was one of those major truth claims that was being denied by certain deceivers and seducers, that they wanted to lead people away. There are lots of little conversations that can be had in Christianity that are on the edges of maybe second-tier issues that we can agree to disagree on. This isn't one of them. The reality that Jesus came in the flesh and was God with us bodily, that's not something we can disagree on. He goes on to say in verse number 9, that whoever transgresses does not abide in the doctrine of Christ. So these people that have their doctrine wrong and they're heretical, they don't have God. If they don't abide in the doctrine of Christ, they don't have the Father or the Son. There seemed to be some sort of teaching where people were trying to separate the Father from the Son. We aren't entirely sure of what that was, but even verse number 3 in the greeting, John goes out of his way to push this point home. He gives a greeting that's kind of standard protocol, but he actually gives some extra, where he says, grace and peace and mercy be to you from God the Father. That would be normal. But then he adds, and from the Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the Father, in verse number 3. It's not just grace, peace, mercy from God or God the Father, and it's not even just from God and Jesus, but Jesus, Lord Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus Christ, who is the Son of the Father. He's going out of his way to say, this grace, mercy, and peace, who's it coming from, the Father or Jesus? Don't oppose them to each other. Don't try to have some sort of teaching where you're putting them in opposition. No. This is coming from both of them, and it's John's way of refuting a theology that would somehow teach that they were in opposition. And he's saying, no, there is oneness of purpose between the Father and the Son. There's no daylight in between them in purpose. They are on the same page, and there's these teachings that are swirling. That's the point. These deceivers are denying oneness between the Father and the Son. They're denying the incarnation of Jesus. These are big deals. And John says you need to be aware deceivers are around. I don't think that I need to elaborate extensively on this point because we just a couple months ago worked through the book of Jude. And if you weren't here then you can go back and listen to those, but the majority of you were, and Jude beats this drum constantly, that there are deceivers, there are seducers, there are false teachers, and we need to contend for the faith. We had a whole series on this, so I won't regurgitate all of that. We'll just leave it at, Jude wasn't the only one who thought and saw this. Jesus knew this would come, and he predicted it. Paul talked about it. Peter talked about it. Jude talked about it. John talked about it. This was happening. This does happen. We need to be aware of this as Christians. We don't need to be glad just because there is something merely pseudo-Christian on TV or on the radio waves or in print in a book. We're after more than someone loosely claims the name of Jesus. We're after more than that. We need more discernment than that. You need to know that come Thanksgiving, or Christmas rather, and then Easter, that PBS is going to put out whatever new special they have on Jesus, and it's going to be, in theory, pro-Jesus, but it's going to probably be 50% trash. There's probably going to be a whole lot of weird theories and Da Vinci Code creeping in, and can we really trust, and do we really know, and that sort of stuff. And what seems to be at face value pro-Jesus is likely going to be something that is not going to lead people to Jesus with any sort of certainty or truth. I wish that there was somehow like one person that God had ordained that would just like constantly tell us right or wrong, green light, red light, and some sort of angel that would put their stamp of approval on everything. But that doesn't exist, okay? There is no agency that is going to monitor this in the Christian bookstore and make sure that there's not something that's heretical. You can find all kinds of seduction and deceivers for all kinds of reasons all over the place. And Christians have to be aware of this. We have to, as the next verse would say, look to ourselves. We have to have our head on a swivel and examine and know that this, in fact, is the case. Now, what's interesting to me is not necessarily that he tells us they're deceivers. What's interesting to me are the directions. And here are the directions that he gives in verse number 10. If you have this heretic, what do? Do you love them back to doctrinal purity? And love them and care for them and show them the true way of Jesus, therefore getting them back on the right path? Or do you emphasize the truth? Which one trumps which? Well, here it is, verse 10. If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine. What doctrine? Well, the doctrine that Jesus would come in the flesh. The doctrine that There's oneness of purpose with Jesus and the Father, and they're not opposed to each other. The deity of Jesus. He doesn't say these overtly, but there are major truth claims in Christianity. The doctrine that we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus alone and not of our own works. That Jesus dies for sins as a substitutionary death, that Jesus rose from the dead. These things are major truth claims. If they don't have this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. Now, we don't say Godspeed a lot any longer, but Godspeed is simply the idea of safe travels. We may say, God bless you. It's well wishes. I'm praying for you. Let me stop right now and pray over you that God would bless you and keep you, wishing them some sort of divine protection, some sort of good fortune. He says, don't do that. Do not help them. Do not support them. Do not have them in your house. Do not give them food. Do not pray for them. You can pray that God would turn things around, but don't pray that God would bless them. Now, at first glance, this is going to feel and seem real unloving, almost harsh. Perhaps to some of you, it may even feel bizarre. But he says, why? In verse number 11, for he that biddeth him Godspeed is partaker of his evil deeds. If this person is spinning heresy and has these webs of lies that they're trapping people in, and you are helping them and assisting them and supporting them, then you are taking part in their evil ministry, and you don't want to have a part of that. You want to give that a wide berth and steer clear of them. And if you have to choose, in this instance, between truth and love, choose truth. Don't lovingly invite them into your home and be hospitable and welcome them. No, do not let them in your house, and do not be a partaker in their ministry. Truth trumps love here. And this is apparently something that the church needed, because he had told them truth and love, truth and love, truth and love, the first 6 verses. But apparently the river of love had so overflown the banks of truth that they were in danger of supporting, or perhaps not in danger, but actually were supporting those who had nefarious ends and were anti-Jesus, who he calls Antichrist. This is something that takes a spirit of discernment personally, corporately, and just largely for Christians to understand that we do not want to support anyone and everything that is Christian in name. There are organizations and ministers and televangelism shows that you don't want to give your money to. It's not just that it's not the best thing, it's that it would be a bad thing. There are people that you don't want to recommend their books, and you don't want to share their podcasts, and you don't want to introduce people to them because it will be harmful for them. There is a protective environment that Christians and churches should have where we're not plowing the road of heresy for someone so that they can just travel smoothly. Does that make sense? This is something that John steps onto the scene and says, listen, truth is going to trump love in this instance. Now, this can be confusing for people for multiple reasons, not the least of which is there are ministers who will teach the opposite of this. If you're looking for someone who will tell you that love trumps truth, you won't have to look very far. There are people that will say that over and over and over again. One, I think, classic example of this was not all that long ago. The Episcopal Bishop of Virginia was getting on to some 500 bishops that were there, part of their diocese, for being concerned that the Episcopal Church had just ordained, or what they call consecrate. They just consecrated their first homosexual minister. And there were ministers that were concerned about this. So Reverend Lee got up and said to the 500 other Episcopal ministers, I quote, "If we have to make a choice between heresy and schism, always choose heresy. For as a heretic, you're only guilty of a wrong opinion. But as a schismatic, you've torn and divided the body of Christ choose heresy every time. Now, he used heresy and schism. We would be using the words truth and love, but that is an overt. We're going to choose love, not truth. We're going to not make waves and follow after peace, and we'll set truth to the side. And if we have to choose one, love trumps truth. Now, to be fair to Reverend Lee, he did go on to say that he hoped they would avoid both heresy and schism, but he was on record and got applause for him saying love trumps truth. Now, my question to Reverend Lee would be, have you read 2 John? What do you do with this? Where John says, divide from them. They are heretical in their teaching. Do not support them. Do not love them in this way. You need to divide and don't have them into your home. So this is confusing for us because there are ministers who are saying love trumps truth. It's confusing for us because as a culture, there's a lot of emphasis on love. Love's very in vogue, and truth is not anymore. We touched on this last week, so I won't elaborate on that any further, but there are cultural waters that we're swimming in that make this difficult. It's also confusing for sincere Bible-believing Christians because there's such an emphasis on love in the scriptures. Is there not? There's a huge emphasis on love. Let's not diminish love. The first commandment is to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. The most famous verse is God loved, so he gave his only begotten son. Ever read 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter? Paul makes it clear. You can have all this faith. You can move a mountain with your faith. But if you don't have love, whoop-de-doo. You can give all your stuff away. But if you don't have love, what is a profit? You can speak with the tongues of angels, but if you don't have love, what does that mean? There's this huge emphasis, even at the end of that chapter. Paul would say, now abides faith, hope, charity. Faith, hope, and love, these three. The greatest of these is love. Didn't 1 John tell us that God is love? And that if you don't know and have love, then you're not of God? Didn't he say that? So there's all this emphasis on love, and it could confuse you to the point to where you think, well, maybe love trumps truth. That's not how it goes. Now, I want to be fair. Rare is the instance where you actually are at an impasse where you can only have to choose one or the other. Sometimes we make up scenarios and like there's a tension, but we actually can do truth and love. We can actually do both at the same time, the vast, vast, vast majority of the time. But if you have to choose, you choose truth. I think there's a great example of this. There's so many of them that I could give, but one comes from Philippians chapter number 1. I did put actually in your notes a series of sermons from Dr. Wickham. It was recommended to me by his daughter-in-law last week, and I listened to them, and he mentions this passage and several others and does a fantastic job of describing how truth should trump love. But here's one example, one of many. This is Philippians 1, where Paul says that there are some people in verse 15 who preach Christ of envy and strife, and some also of goodwill. It's two groups of people. They're both preaching Jesus. Like they're not heretical. Their doctrine's straight and pure. One is preaching with all the wrong motives. There's envy, there's strife. This happens amongst ministers, sadly, where ministers see the other minister or the other church as their competition, or they're envious that you have this ministry or this is growing, and they start to want to work against each other, and they don't have the right motives as they're going about preaching and ministering. Like, I wish it didn't happen, but it does. Here are these two groups. Verse 16, one preached Christ of contention, not even sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my bonds. They're not for me. They're against me. They're not sincere. There's envy in their hearts. But the other of love. So one group does not have love. The other group does have love. Now, what does Paul say to this? They know that I'm set for the defense of the gospel. So what then? Well, notwithstanding in every way, whether pretense or truth, whether envy or love, Christ is preached. Therein I do rejoice and will rejoice. And what is he saying? There's one group that preaches the truth and they do it in love. I rejoice in that. Time out. What about the group who's preaching the truth, but they're not doing it out of love? They have truth, but they don't have love. I'm going to rejoice. The truth is still going forward. That's enough for me. I'm going to rejoice in that too. But you look at the instances in Paul's accounts, John's accounts, Jude's accounts, Peter's accounts, where it's flipped, where someone is sincere and they're loving and they're well-intentioned, but they're not preaching the truth. They never rejoice in it. They never rejoice in it. They always say, this is wrong, this needs to be corrected, we take no joy in this, we have to have the truth go forward. It is this kind of a meta-narrative inside of the epistles that you have to have truth, you have to start there. Even the idea in 1 Corinthians 13, right? Well, love is the greatest. Didn't it say that? The greatest of these is love. That's what 1 Corinthians 13 says. I was exiting the office on Thursday afternoon, actually right around noon. It may have been 11:30, 11:45. My study habit is to study predominantly the bulk of my study on Mondays. I try not to have other work on Mondays. If you call me, I probably won't answer. And I try to study on Mondays. In an ideal world, I'm done with my sermon by the end of Monday, and I put it to bed, and then I raise it from sleep on Saturday, and I review it. The ideal world doesn't often happen though. So there's Monday, and then Thursday, the back half of Thursday, I almost never schedule anything because that's my when I will actually get it wrapped up if I didn't get it done on Monday or Tuesday or something. So this week was kind of a normal week. We had Monday, but there was actually some stuff on Monday. We had the opening day of school and some different things. I didn't have as much time as I wanted. So Thursday, I'm heading out of the office to go study. I do almost no study on campus because it's very difficult to get deep thought work done when I'm here on campus. So I'm leaving. I have a couple study spots. I'm not going to tell you where they are because you'll come bug me and you'll know where I'm hiding. So I'm going to my hideout some of you know where it's at though, to go do some study. And I'm leaving the office. I know what I'm going to preach on Sunday. And there's a few just kind of floating around the office. Pastor Dom was there and Matt was there. And I think Casey and Stacy. And I said, hey, truth or love, which one's greater? Which one trumps which? It's just kind of a flat question. And there wasn't like an immediate oh, truth trumps love, absolutely the end, quick answer. It was like, let me think about that. And one of them even said, well, isn't love the greatest? 1 Corinthians 13. It's like, well, there's faith, hope, and love. Out of those three, it doesn't say the greatest out of everything in the whole world. Out of those three, love's the greatest. But if you read 1 Corinthians 13, love rejoices in the truth, it says. You can't have real love without the truth and rejoicing in that truth. And as we talked, it probably took us 4 minutes. It didn't take very long. But I just kind of let them, talk it out a little bit. And they landed on where John lands, where the Bible really lands. Truth has to trump love at times. If you have to choose between the two, that's going to be the trump suit. Truth is. I also think this is confusing for people because if you read your Bible or just you look at life stories, here's what popped in my head as I studied this. I said, okay, I get it. I get what John's saying. It's simple. But is John saying that if someone doesn't know the truth, believe the truth, espouse the truth, preach the truth, that I can never have them into my home for a meal? Is that what he's saying? I mean, if I think about the ministry of Jesus, didn't Jesus have people that didn't know the truth? They didn't come to his house because he was homeless, but he would go to their house or they'd sit down for a meal. Didn't Jesus, he got criticism for it, right? He got flack for it. That there were these publicans and these sinners and these people that didn't know and believe and have the truth theologically, morally. The woman at the well who's super messed up theologically as she's talking to him. But he would sit there and he would talk to them and he would be hospitable with them and they'd have a meal together. And how do I reconcile that ministry of Jesus with 2 John? How do I reconcile life stories? I've told you all and used on numerous occasions the illustration of Rosaria Butterfield. She was a professor at Syracuse University and a practicing lesbian who was doing research on Christians and wrote to, I believe, Presbyterian minister and said, can I interview you? And they said, yeah, come over for dinner. And then she kept coming over for dinner and eventually believed on Jesus and got saved and eventually married another Presbyterian minister, and she's a pastor's wife, and she wrote a book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key, where she advocates for radical hospitality towards sinners and seekers, to have them into your home and love them and show them the way of Jesus. And that's a book that I would endorse, I would recommend, I would agree with what she says in the book. But how do I reconcile that with 2 John? Where he says, don't be hospitable to them. I got Hebrews that tells me to be extra hospitable as a Christian, but I have John that seems to say, hey, if they don't know or believe the truth, don't be hospitable. And here is the answer. You have to understand the category of person that John is talking about. And I want to give this to you clearly, because if I don't thread this needle well, you're going to misunderstand and misapply what he's saying. And I want you to understand it well. There are 5 basic categories of people. And I want to tell you if you should open your door to them or not, okay? The first category of people is those that are saved. These people are of the household of faith. They know Jesus, they love Jesus, they're on Team Jesus. Now you tell me, do you open your door and love them and bless them and pray for them and even say, you wouldn't say Godspeed, but God bless you. Do you open or close your door with those that are saved? You tell me. You open, right? We're to be overly hospitable to each other and loving to each other and warm to each other and share with each other, supporting each other. Then you have seekers. These people are not of the household of faith, but they have questions. They're curious. They're investigating. I think of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus didn't know the truth or believe the truth, but he wanted to know something about Jesus. And what did Jesus and Zacchaeus do? They shared a meal together. They sat down, they talked, and Zacchaeus' life was changed because of it. This is someone who they don't know or espouse the truth yet, but they're open to it. They're asking questions. They're curious. These sorts of people, do we open our door to them or do we close our door to them? Sure we do. We open our door. Even as a church, we welcome seekers in. We say your questions are valid. Come ask your questions. We would love to have you. We have days designed around this, i.e. Friend Day in 2 weeks, right? What is Friend Day? Invite all your friends, neighbors, relatives. Yeah, but especially the ones that don't know Jesus. We'd love to have them here, and we'd love to preach Jesus to them. We want them to be here. We want to give them coffee. We'll give them a gift box. Is that antithetical to 2 John? These people that don't know Jesus, that we will be hospitable and warm to them and feed them tacos? John said not to help them. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about seekers. You also have not a seeker, but you have the simple. These people aren't opposed to Jesus, but they're not for Jesus either. They're not really asking questions. They're not curious. They're just going through life. They're kind of agnostic when it comes to religion and Jesus, and they're just very simple. Proverbs talks a lot about these people. Pilate would be a good example of this in the ministry of Jesus. Pilate wasn't for Jesus, but he wasn't really against Jesus. He was pretty indifferent. You're just another guy, He didn't know the truth. He didn't believe the truth. He wasn't saved. But he's just simple. With simple people, can you love them? Can you be hospitable to them? Can you help them? Can you pray for blessings on their family and that God would show himself to them? Sure you can. When you get beyond the simple, it starts to get a little dicier. You start to enter into the territory of scorners. These are people who are anti-Jesus, and they will let you know it. They don't pretend to be on Team Jesus. They do not act as though they love the Bible. They do not quote verses in defense of their position. They are overt and outright and in your face that you as a Christian are an idiot and you must have taken your brain out and put it on a shelf if you could believe that old book. And how could you be so bigoted and not accept people who have this version of sexuality or not use their pronouns or do these things? And they're just in your face. Scorners, as a rule of thumb, you're told to give them a wide berth. Proverbs has a lot on this. Psalms has a lot on this. You don't sit directly under their influence. You tend to cast them out, right? There's a big difference between someone who comes to church who doesn't know Jesus and says, hey, I'm curious. Can you help me understand this? And someone who comes to church with a Palestinian flag waving death to Israel in the middle of the song service, right? One is welcome to stay. The other is not just welcome to leave. They're going to be forcibly removed, right? Like, you can't just come and scorn. We're not going to welcome you in that way or say, that's fine. That's not okay. There are some instances, like scorners aren't hopeless. Think the maniac of Gadara. This person that everyone in the town, if you read the Gospel of Mark, had figured out, like, dude, we can't be around this guy. Let's quarantine him to the graveyard and get him away from us. And Jesus wasn't exactly Zacchaeus with this guy. It wasn't like, well, come to town hall and have a meal with us. But he did meet him, he did try to help him, and he actually changed his life. Scorners aren't without hope, but as a rule of thumb, if someone's a scorner, you're yelling into the wind. They're not interested in learning. They don't really have sincere questions. They're there just to be a thorn in your flesh. It's not that it's immoral or wrong per se. It's just foolish and unwise to open your door to them and say, let's hang out all the time. This is kind of what's at the heart of the Christian school movement that really took birth in the 1970s. There was a public school environment that wasn't perfect, but as a rule of thumb, the teachers were allowed to use the scriptures in their learning. Kids were allowed to pray in school. Most of the teachers went to church. It wasn't really an anti-God environment, but as evolutionary theory began to become in vogue, and not only in vogue, but mandated into the scientific textbooks of the public school systems, as prayer became banned in the public school systems, parents began to realize, I think we're now in an environment that's a bit more scornful to my faith than I would like, and I'm looking for an alternative. And churches began to hear this from parents largely and said, hey, we're kind of in an educational realm of knowing the scriptures and teaching. We have this facility that is a church, but there's all these Sunday school classrooms, and we do church on Sunday, but Monday through Friday during school hours, it kind of sits empty. What if there could be a partnership here, right? And churches began to start Christian schools really out of the premise of, let's not sit in the seat of the scornful. There began to be parents that would say, I don't want to send my money to something like that. I really don't want to send my kids to something like that. I'm looking for an alternative. This is not to say that you must put your kid in a Christian school. That's not what I'm saying. I've been on record for a long time. We have a Christian school here. We love it. We support it. We're so glad we have it. But that's a parental choice. You can make arguments for public school versus private school versus homeschool. I've heard them all. There's validity to all of them to some degree. All I'm trying to say is that many people who choose a Christian education, like the school we have here out of our church, it is because they don't want their children to sit in the seat of the scornful. It's because they don't want them indoctrinated with, you're in fourth grade and have to use her different pronouns now, or you have to believe this evolutionary theory, or you can't pray. That they want a different environment for their children. And that's a valid thing to desire, and you can make a strong biblical case for there's some wisdom to try to steer clear of the scorners. But beyond the scorners, you have a whole nother level, and that is who John has in mind. Those are the seducers. Those are the deceivers, as he calls them. These people are not scorners because they don't tell you they're anti-Jesus. They pretend as though they are Jesus, that they're on his team. They're wolves in sheep's clothing. They're there to lead you astray. They're there to say the right things and quote the verses and tell you that they're praying for you and all of the stuff, but really they're there to feed you misinformation and lies and deceit, to get you into their cult or to get their hands in your pocketbook or whatever it may be. And it's that category of person that John says, do not help them. Do not welcome them. Do not host them. Do not feed them. Do not give them money. Do not bless them. Don't do that. So here's the point. If you take 2 John and you apply it to every category of person, you'll make a mess of it. If you ignore 2 John and act as though it doesn't ever apply to anyone, and there's never these instances where truth is going to trump love, and the most loving thing, quote unquote, is going to be set to the side in an effort to guard the truth, if you don't recognize that that's a reality for Christians, then you're going to make a mess of it too. John is clear to say, listen, there are some instances where truth is going to trump love. But then I want you to see lastly that there's dividends. This is verse number 8. He says, I want you to do all this, and I want you to look to yourselves. Look at yourself, examine yourself, take inventory. That we lose not the things that we have wrought. There are things we've worked for. The truth and protecting the truth and true doctrine. There are things that we have worked for, but that we receive a full reward. Don't lose what you've worked for, but receive a full reward. I'll put it this way. When I was in my senior year of high school, I was on the basketball team, loved basketball, played a lot of basketball. We had 5 starters. Our 5th starter was a senior, and he started the game, honestly, just because he was a senior. He was probably the 6th or 7th best player on the team, but our best player was actually an 8th grader, like our 5th best player. So Andrew was his name. Andrew would start the game, and about 2 minutes later, he'd be pulled out of the game. And he'd get some playing time, but not a ton. But he always started because he was a senior, and it was just kind of, it seemed like the appropriate thing to do in that instance. I can remember vividly, I'm a senior and Andrew's a senior. We played a lot of basketball together. Andrew is good at getting rebounds. That was it. That was his whole game. Couldn't shoot a free throw. I don't think he ever scored, but he got rebounds. And I can remember inbounding the ball. I am towards the opposing team's goal. Well, we're in a gym. This will be really easy, actually, okay? We're going that way on that goal. I'm here on the sideline. I never pass the ball into Andrew because Andrew doesn't dribble. Andrew gets rebounds. That's what he does. And Andrew is screaming for the ball. Andrew is from me to John saying, ball, ball, ball. And he's screaming. And I'm thinking to myself, Coach must have told him something that I missed because this guy has never done this and he needs this ball. So I pass the ball to Andrew. Andrew proceeds to take 2 dribbles, not that way, but that way. Assuming that he is the most open person in the history of basketball ever. Because there are no defenders. They're down there to play defense where they should play defense. And somehow, Andrew is convinced that this is our goal. I do not know this when I pass Andrew the ball. He takes 2 dribbles. He normally can't make a layup, but in this instance, he makes the layup and he scores for the other team. To which we all, as a rule of thumb, you want teamwork and camaraderie. Like, hey, it's okay, we'll get them next time. No, we are all, what are you doing? We are just animated and screaming at this kid. Like, what have you just done? This is varsity basketball, and you scored a bucket. This isn't elementary, right? This isn't peewee. You just scored for the other team. There is no reward for that. Congratulations that you dribbled well and that you made the layup, but there's no reward. There's the opposite. And what John is saying is, I want a full reward. I don't want to lose the ground that I've made. If I go assist these deceivers, I'm scoring buckets for the other team. God is going to be like my coach who is going to say, what are you doing? Stop it. Don't do that. You gotta go in the right direction, right? It's a fair thought. And he's saying, I want to get to heaven. I want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. I want God to give me a pat on the back and say, I'm proud of you. You did good work. You were aimed in the right direction. But if I go score buckets for the opposing team, I'm not going to get that. There's no reward there. And he's right. They said, I want to help you. This particular church had so much love that it was trumping truth at times. Their heart was so big and they were so generous and they cared so much about people that they started to help the deceivers and the seducers. And somebody had to come along and say, listen, let's love and let's love well. Let's have truth in love. But if we have to choose between the two, we can't just default to love and have no truth. We're going to make a mess of it if we do. I'll close by saying I am very grateful that God in heaven did not feel that he had to choose between the two. I'm so grateful that most of the time we don't have to choose between the two either. Even an instance of like, what do I do? My nephew just invited me to their same-sex wedding. Listen, shoot me an email. I'll give you my default response to that. There's a way to do truth and love. Even in that instance, it's hard, but you can do truth and love together in there. You can. At least you can try to. I'm so glad that God came in truth to tell us that I'm the only way. Look at me. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody's going to God. No one gets to the Father except through me. I'm glad for that. But I'm glad that truth came in love. A humbleness to come as man. A willingness to love us well and die on a cross. To offer us salvation. Jesus offers truth and love in such a beautiful, blended way that that's always our goal. Our goal is not to just constantly trump love with truth. That's not our goal. But if we have to, if push comes to shove, truth does in fact trump love.